there have been these interesting moments in terms of things to carry forward. I mean, Andy, you probably experienced this with your sextet, where like we were getting ready for a woodwind quintet concert, and I'll be very, I don't know, curious and maybe a little bit of an overachiever, and I'm trying to get my colleagues to get on board with certain things, and I'm like, we could use, even if you just have a Mac, we could just like use GarageBand, and we could rehearse, like we could multi-track it, and then you can like play along with different instruments and stuff like that. And they're like, I don't really want to do it, but we ended up having to do it anyway as part of our coaching. And you know what I don't care what they say, it helped a ton. And I bet people were at home playing along with these little recordings, whether they want to admit it or not, because it was like we'd get to the next live rehearsal and I'd be like, yeah, okay, yeah, you rehearsed it, I know you did. And I'm like, well, why can't we do that? Why can't we create these tools to help us get better? I mean, I think we can. We have.
That's a really
That's
cool
one
idea.
thing. Well, one thing we're gonna play. Latitude 49 is gonna do a live rehearsal and concert cycle in North Carolina in August, assuming our violinist Tim can get across the border from Canada. We're gonna give it a shot, and even though we'll be in person, we're gonna prepare for that by doing what you're saying. We're gonna send out a click track like we did for this album recording we did, and we're gonna layer the tracks, and we're gonna listen, and we're gonna solo out. Like the sextet is like the eighth blackbird instrumentation, but sax instead of flute. So I'm gonna like solo out the sax track and play with that.
So you know what's fascinating? One of the things that I learned the hard way was that there's a, obviously there are so many different ways to put these projects together, right? The most successful way we found was to actually play along with commercial recordings and record ourselves, and that was the only way we could get any sense of like musical intention, and pitch and lengths of notes, and all of those things would line up. So we never had any success with passing the tracks around, but we weren't playing new music, so we were playing stuff that you could get a commercial recording. But when we started doing things like we played a piece by Jeff Scott, starting something, and we started kind of passing the tracks around fairly unsuccessfully. The person who does the editing, I think, learns the most. So if there's a way to kind of like democratize the editing, strengthens, I think, the ensemble's ears. That's what I've been trying to get my students to do in their quintet, because it's like then you're actually forced to listen to the ensemble and be like, that doesn't sound together. Rewind it, and you go like, who's early, who's late, who's sharp, who's flat. And those are skills that translate directly back into the ensemble, I think.
For years, my duo had to do this. I think we are kind of maybe coming up with a very non-scientific, sort of conclusion, maybe, that the bigger the ensemble, the harder this is to do, but my duo with Miriam Adam, she's been living in France for the last 6 years. And so anytime we both had families and, careers and like wildly different places, but we would do these tours and gigs, and we would get together for this like really embarrassingly small amount of time to rehearse for a group where, two clarinets is supposed to be pretty homophonic, right? And blend. So that was, for us, for years, it was just absolutely necessary that we would like record, and we would like premiere pieces and just come together, new moms and teaching schedules and whatever, and come together and just have to play. And that recording and passing back and forth of recordings was just absolutely key. But again, it's so easy just to get the intent even of one other person that I can't even imagine, with an orchestra. And then lesser, it seems like a sextet, will be a little bit easier than like a full orchestra. I don't know. What do you guys think? Do you think like the smaller the ensemble, the easier it is to get intent by recordings?
It's hard. Like, I just finished the recordings for one of the pieces Cabrillo Festival's doing this summer, and they send us like a click track and a MIDI recording of the piece to listen to for pitch, And so I'll hear like MIDI second clarinet, imagining Sean playing MIDI second clarinet, and I'm playing bass clarinet, and trying to, and like that works, But I think what Ralph said is interesting is that the thing that's hard is like I'm guessing musical intention from my colleagues, and I mean, with the magic of editing, we can make it sound lush and beautiful, and the players are amazing. But like what I want is that feeling of like the orchestra is moving here, like that you can't capture it. And for me, that like that's one of the losses. And I can't even imagine the loss that like Sergei or Ralph's feeling in that way of just like you're used to being part of this incredible organism.
What you're saying is like it really rings true for me. And in fact, as I was driving home, I was thinking of like I also got into a lot of online gaming during this time because I was so bored. I had so much time on my hands. So like I see the world like a game now. And so I was imagining these meters where it's like I would call them like my attention meters. And it's like, when I had to play some chamber music a couple weeks ago, and it was like in the pandemic time, like the paying attention to other people meter is like way down. The paying attention to myself meter is way up. The like playing with my own rhythm is way up. And then today I'm sitting on stage and I'm just like, okay, so now it's like the paying attention to myself meter's down. The like playing with good internal rhythm is also down. The paying attention to what I see is way up. And I just was like, the skills feel so alien. And yet it's like when you're asked to do it, when the music director says like this phrase goes to here and we all move there together, and you're like, oh, I remember that that's possible. Oh my God. Because when I'm playing along with recordings, I'm pushing them or I'm pulling them and they're not moving. And then eventually after a year, you're like, oh, that's okay. But it's going to come back. The next time you're on stage, you're going to feel it. It's there.
I can't wait. Like, I can't even imagine what that's like to actually play. I haven't played with my orchestra for it's been like a year and 2 months. So I can't even imagine just like the lushness, and it must almost be like 3D, right? Like it's just like stereophonic on, steroids. Like it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, just hearing yourself in another space, or even like, I got one of these goofy ring lights, right? So after the first rehearsal, I completely tripped all over everything I had to play. And I was like, what is going on? Everything's so different. So I came home and put this right over my stand while I was playing, because I was like, I want to rehearse what it feels like to have these bright lights shining down on me from stage, because it was so distracting. I know what's happening in this room. I've been locked in here for a year. So, but it's awesome.
The room thing is real. Like I played like a distanced recital at UNCG, and we did Kegelstadt, and I remember after the first movement we finished, and the pianist was like, wow, really a sensitive approach. She basically saying I was too soft. And I don't, so that's never been a thing. I'm like, I've got a good range dynamic, but I was so used to playing in my little like home, like it's pretty loud in my home office. It felt really loud in there with carpet. And now it's, so I mean, like learning to like fill the space again and trust that sort of resonance was like a little bit weird at first coming out.
Have you guys made massive equipment changes during the pandemic? I've been really fighting to not go down the rabbit hole of mouthpieces and reeds, but having a microphone this close is making me crazy.
Well, because I haven't been playing with an orchestra, but it's like anything I've been doing has been like, recording stuff and like, in a hall or like solo stuff or whatever. When I did start recording with like a pianist or like really, really small chamber groups from a distance, my setup was like, had just gotten softer and softer. Where I was like, oh, wait a second, you get out into a bigger space and you've got this like sort of klezmer jazz reed on all of a sudden, because you just realize that you just kind of slightly let everything just get softer. And you're teaching at home, so you want that reed that you pick up and you're like, not something you really have to work against. So I need to, break in harder reeds again.
It does kind of give me a little bit of hope hearing Stephanie and Sergei and Andy talk about the fact that maybe people's expectations aren't for perfection during this time, because my experience has been 180 degrees the opposite. I mean, losing all of the, sort of like comfort of routine without, sacrificing the level of expectation at work has kind of like turned my work experience on its head, to the point where I'm dealing with things that I've never had to deal with before mentally. And and I think you're right. Like it does make sense that, this is a different time now, and these are not commercial recordings, and we are spaced out, and all the rest. But at the same time, there are people who are on their tenure review, and the music director's only in town for a few weeks, and so suddenly they're being held to a level of perfection, and so it's like it's hard to turn that off. It's hard to turn that expectation off when it's like the way you've been living. And it's so interesting because I have had some experiences where that hasn't been true. And it's been like when I open up my garage and invite some people over and we just play chamber music and my neighbors come out and listen. And then it's just like I'm free and I can just let it go. But it'd be great if I could take that back to the stage when the microphones and the high def cameras are right up your nose, and it's different.
Ralph, I'm also going to steal this thing that you were saying about, and tell my students if it's okay, that anytime anyone gets nervous for anything, it's like, are you standing backstage in a plexiglass box, not able to play your clarinet before you go on stage and play Untitled with the Detroit Symphony? And I'll be like, there's no need for nerves if you're not doing that.
It didn't go great. Wasn't wasn't our finest moments, but
Whose decision was it to schedule Hinastera during COVID?
Someone who
not
was
a clarinetist.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cruel. That's just cruel.
Well, just like the urge to try that reed must have been like overpowering, right? Just to like make a sound.
It's like I tell my students sometimes, like sometimes you just have to trust, and I'm sitting backstage just like I just have to trust. I just have to trust. I just have to trust. Like, here's another takeaway for me is how privileged I've been in terms of dealing with performance anxiety through my job. Because it's like anything else. Like if I have to be on stage 6 out of 7 days a week and I'm playing 4 or 5 concerts a week, like eventually it's not so hard anymore. And so then my students are like, I struggle with performance anxiety. And I'm like, oh, well, it's not that bad. Like oh yeah, it's real bad. Now I know, because you took my performances away and I don't have that buffer. Work's not doing it for me anymore. And now I'm like, oh my God, I totally get where you're coming from. Let's investigate this together and find something that's going to work for here and now for you and me.
I miss being able to like make sounds during students' lessons. And like when I go and do the outside or big space lessons where I'm in person, like how much you take for granted just being able to be like, no, okay, and just snap and sing. Because you all know the second you make that sound on Zoom, they're like, what? And like you move your chair and they stop playing. And you're like, oh my God, and just that awkwardness of not being able to like count or sing or anything while they're playing. I really miss.
Or play with them, along with them.
Yes, like no way. Sometimes I've had them like mute, and then I'm like, play with me, but they could just be sitting there going, Zelnick's such a dum-dum. And I would just think that they were playing, right?
I use this book by Garwood Whaley called Basics in Rhythm. And the reason that I was doing it was because I taught for a semester at Oakland University, and just in talking with some of the other faculty there, they were like, a lot of the kids that they see, especially at the master's level, just have these holes in terms of their like holes just in their understanding of how rhythm works, whether it's the difference between simple meter and compound meter or something like that. And so I just wanted to start at the very, very beginning and just explain it from beginning to end so that, you could kind of jump in. And what was crazy was I designed it for high school students. And honestly, the only people who signed up were grad students. And I was shocked by that because there just seems to be, it's almost like, I don't know, I mean, you guys have way more experience with this than I do, but I don't know if there's this shame factor, like they get to a certain point and then they're like, I can't admit that I don't know how to count in 12/8 or something,
I wonder, Ralph, with you, if why grad students sign up is because when you get to that age that you that's at least for me, I was very immature, still very immature, but it took me that long to realize that I need all these things. You know what I mean? Like in high school, I didn't really know that there's actually something to rhythm except for like just play it like this, And then I think when you're a grad student, you come back to these basics, but with the different different ears, different eyes.
No, I think that's totally true. And that was the experience. I mean, so I did have a few students who kind of stuck it out with me. And the way that the book works is like it's probably just like any other rhythm book. It's just the one that I used when I was in high school. My band director is the one who wrote it. So we used it as a part of every rehearsal every morning. And so what we would do is every unit is made up of this concept, and then the concept has these little rhythmic keys that you practice, and then the exercises are made up from these keys. And so you just sort of build these things slowly. And then you're supposed to have them do it kind of like as a group, because you're practicing the skill of sight reading, looking ahead and like jumping back in when you make a mistake and not getting flustered and stuff like that. So that's an additional skill that this is supposed to. So I just did the mute thing, like what I think Stephanie was saying, where you just, all right, mute yourself and go along with me. And I'm like watching really closely to see if anybody's screwing up, but I'm also trying not to screw up myself. But it's just clapping and counting and teaching them words that then can be internalized as subdivisions and stuff like that.
Just to back that up, Ralph, too, about the rhythm, like I've done a lot of touring in South America, Latin America, and like there, it's like all they do is rhythm at the beginning, and then it's like, man, I mean, that's just going to be that first thing, because I mean, honestly, I'm sure everyone on here has this too. You have so many students have like great fundamentals and sounds, but still are just working to ingrain that rhythm. And how great just to start off with those exercises just when you're like 10, 11, 12, and just that, that's the age that you're supposed to be learning multiple languages and all that. And so like, why not learn rhythm right at that very beginning?
And vice versa. Like we've had students audition for the studio before who like, maybe they don't have a great sound, or maybe they've never taken private lessons, but if they come in and play whatever piece they found on the internet with perfect rhythm, it's like you're in. Because like I can fix your hand position, but like if they come in able to like keep a beat, if they sight read with perfect rhythm, like sold. I would love to work with that student. Something that is interesting about the pandemic, and especially these live streamed performances, is like seeing into people's intimate space while they're performing. And so I think about like the brilliant Chicago percussionist Peter Ferry, who I saw do this amazing concert from his living room, and he limited the audience to like 15 people, and we would all hang out together beforehand, and then he would play, and we would watch him, and then we would talk afterwards. And I think that access to the performer and that ability to feel very close to them is something that I will want going forward. I think you're exactly right, Sergei, that like knowing intimately the people playing music is something our audiences are going to want from us. And I think it's something that our students are already sort of used to getting with the way they consume media. Like they're used to sort of watching on TikTok very intimate spaces with people who make art. But I think for us, we're a little bit behind the curve on that. And I think that that's something I'm hoping to continue to try to find ways to share and also to receive.
I got to do a couple of like meetings with donors in Boulder and my orchestra out there that, I never, usually you're just like separated by what we have set up as classical music, which is like, we're on a stage and we're super far away and you're like squinting out into the hall and it's like bright lights are on you and there's not a window in there. And it's like, don't cough, don't mess up. Like Sergei was saying, and, it's like that little bit of that nerves too, that you're so separated from people, like you don't hear them breathe or rustle or anything, and you're just like up on this pedestal, like, oh my gosh. And it definitely been like a lot of humanity this year, right? And like you were saying too, Andy, that it's like just seeing what backgrounds people have in their houses. And like Ralph, you play in this enormous orchestra, like, it's like you're the Detroit Symphony, and we can like see you in your house. Like, that's so cool. That's so humanizing, right? And like for audiences too, that I think like look at classical music and they're just like, oh, there's like people up there in tuxedos and all dressed up and they're perfect people. And like, to see us in our houses, and there's a lot less of this going on than there was at the beginning. But the beginning, no one knew where the mute button was on Zoom. So you'd be like hosting, I right away started hosting like a ton of people here, and they would come in and there'd always be like some dog barking or like some neighbor was like yelling or something, and it was like, I don't know, almost maybe it's something we just needed to like break a spell in classical music or something where we were just allowed to be human. And I don't know, like in the like recordings, I recorded like a couple of recitals where like the pianist was like 25 miles away and, you know, like masked and whatever. And I don't know. I feel like I was less nervous. I just thought that was really interesting that Sergei said that about nerves. Like I've found, I don't know what the format is or something. I'd like to hear what you all that kind of encountered about this too. Just maybe it's just a little bit more humanizing and we just needed to like break that spell of none of us ever being able to like make a mistake or experiment. Or Sergei, you were saying about like even the setting you were doing, like you didn't know if the concert was going to be messed up because like a storm was going to come through and you're going to have to stop. And maybe that was okay to have it like that. So I kind of want to get more of that idea of all like this idea that we have to be perfect all the time as classical musicians.
You know, along the same lines, I'm just now thinking back because, like we've said, it's been so long. I'm thinking back to some of the things that happened that I hadn't remembered in a long time. But hearing Sergei talk about, you know, knowing everyone by name and stuff, I think one of the silver linings for the work that we've been doing here is, you know, we made a decision really early on that rather than try to sell a bunch of tickets for our live stream performances, we were going to deepen our connection with our subscribers so that there were people who bought a subscription to the season that then ended up not happening. And rather than, basically we reached out to them and said, we'll give you your money back if you want it. But if you would let us keep it, we're going to give you all of these experiences and then also like some of these perks along the way. And so as part of that, you know, we get these alternative work assignments that come in where it's like, oh, so and so they're celebrating their anniversary. Can you make a video for them for their anniversary? And some of us have gone, you know, a step further and kind of reached out to them on a more personal level to say, you know, tell me about the music at your wedding, and then, you know, make a nice little arrangement of it, multi-track the recording in your home studio or whatever. But then we get these, you know, amazing notes in response. And so humanizing the musicians is one part of it, but also humanizing the donors and understanding why they're so involved in what we're doing. You know, we have a good culture here already, but I think deepening that connection has only been possible because of this digital format, because we do have a donor lounge and we've always spent time in the donor lounge. But I think, like you said, giving a more personal window into someone's life and experience, I think it sort of never would have happened without this discussion. But one thing that happened that was super cool was we started broadcasting, I don't know whether it was like previous concerts. I don't know how this happened, but like there were concerts where the DSO was being broadcast live on Facebook live, but like it was recorded previously. But we'd host these watch parties. And so the audience would come to the watch party and the musicians were there. And the musicians are kind of doing like a play-by-play, like, oh, I remember when, you know, this was when, you know, and the patrons are like loving it. Like they're getting in there and they're just like, why did the flutes play like that? And why did it, you know, and it's like, oh, well, we totally screwed up. But, you know, it's like sometimes it doesn't go our way or whatever. And people loved it. So I'm hoping that that kind of stuff carries forward. These ways of engaging people around music and hopefully pointing them towards a live experience again. But there have been some really unique ways about engaging people with technology. But there just hasn't been a place to give them the live experience again.
You know, I totally agree with you that watching the performance with the audience is really powerful. So I'm in the sextet Latitude 49, and of course all of our concerts were canceled. So we tried to think of stuff, and one of our board members had this idea that each of us should ask like 6 composers to write solo works for our instrument. We're 6 different instruments, and everyone was going to donate the performances, the pieces. Our recording engineer had mastered, and everybody donated, and we raised money with this project for the Coalition for African Americans in the Performing Arts. And it was like a big benefit concert, but everything was pre-recorded. So then at the premiere, we could like talk about the piece and, oh, here's what I was going for, and like I recorded this in my living room. My kids were watching their iPad next to me while I was recording this. Like you can't see them, but like they're right here, and it was incredible how that like created buy-in from these people. And it was fun for like I could answer questions about the multiphonics in Viet Quang's piece like while it's happening on screen. And I think that like I never get to watch a performance like that of my sextet. Like I never get to watch it. So for me, it was in some ways kind of gratifying to like enjoy it alongside these people who never heard the music before. And I'm hoping that that can persist because that's just such a that was like really special, like really unique. I think so. I don't know how we do that. Like I certainly don't want to keep recording myself because I think like you said, the place where my thing breaks down is that like when I have to constantly record myself to be saved forever on the internet on YouTube, I feel very nervous. Whereas like if I'm premiering a piece in a concert hall and I know like we're all here together, it's live, stuff's gonna go wrong, that's half done, you know? It's different than like, okay, this is gonna be saved for all of eternity and everyone's gonna go watch only this performance. And they don't expect it to be live, right? There's no room noise or somebody sniffing. Like that for me has robbed some of the joy, but then I found a way to put the joy back when I sort of like watched it alongside other people, and it was like, oh well, let me tell you what was going on. And I feel like I was able to kind of be a person and not like a clarinet robot.
Yeah, it's cool because like that would have been impossible before. I mean, that's what's so weird is it was totally possible before. Like this panel never would have happened before, but it was totally possible. In the tech industry, everybody was using Slack and Microsoft Teams and all these things, but as artists, like we never collaborated in this way before.
Yeah, like why weren't we bringing people in for master classes from all over before? Like when you had to do a master, I mean, obviously to do a recital, you had to go there, but that's like half of it. And why weren't we all doing master classes for people in Australia and Europe and wherever online? Like, did we really have to be burning all those fossil fuels to do like every single thing that we did? Don't you think sociologically we're going to be really different? Like not just from a musical perspective, but just like those people that came through the Great Depression, they were always frugal forever, like the rest of their lives. And I don't know, I, as musicians, yeah, we're going to come back together. But like when that bassoon player shows up sick to rehearsal, isn't that going to be a little bit jarring? Like, you know, or I was always a little bit like with my students, I've been teaching college for so many years at this point, and it turned me into a little bit of a germaphobe because, you know, I would really see that they would come to their lessons sick and I'd be like, okay, 6 hours, 12 hours, there it is. Okay, you know, and so I was always like, don't come to your lesson if you're sick, you know, just call me up ahead of time. Don't come to the door and be like, I'm sick, you know. But now, like, how much more poignant? Like, don't you think that even 30, 40 years from now, we're going to be a little bit of germaphobes after this, or do you think we'll go back?
It's funny because I feel kind of like I'm not as worried about that as I am like hungry to sit next to people and make music and also have an audience. Whereas like I think before, in the best situation, I was taking it for granted. And when it got really bad, people would annoy me. And, you know, you hear those like historic stories about colleagues that have to sit next to each other, but like they're always turning their chairs away from each other and like trying to get more space and stuff like that. And I feel like if there's anything that lasts with me for decades, it's going to be just the awareness that like, you know, I think I will want to be close to my colleagues, physically close to my colleagues, and I will really, really want the audience there all the time. I will never take for granted the energy that an audience provides to a performance because that has been the single strangest experience to like, you know, have this huge final whatever at the end of a symphony and like nothing. And then you stand up to an empty hall and there's no sound. And it's bizarre. So, but yeah, now I'm going to be a germaphobe. So thanks.
In-person conversations are awkward now because like I'm so used to like pausing so I don't talk over someone. And then like we'll be talking, it's like, hey, how are you? Oh, I'm really good. How are you? It's crazy. I'm having a hard time.
Plus there's like what used to be weird with like the handshake hug is now like the elbow handshake hug. Like I kind of feel like I don't know. What are we doing? I don't...
one of the big takeaways for me during the whole thing has been that I have to reject kind of binary thinking. And what I mean by that is, yes, there's a tremendous sense of loss in this season. Certainly, I mean, loss of life on a catastrophic scale and loss of employment for so many. And I've been so fortunate to have a job during this time. And I have many colleagues who've not been so fortunate. But there's also been opportunity here for growth. For example, I think I and a lot of other performers, I didn't have a lot of experience recording myself ever. And my sextet, Latitude 49, recorded an entire album of solo works individually. And then we also recorded a sextet album with a vocalist individually. And I recorded my tracks and sent them to the next person. And I learned where to put microphones, and I learned how to use gain structures, and I learned that you have to be sure that you don't clip. I don't know what that means. And all these things that I had never dreamed of, and now they seem second nature to me, and I'm really grateful for that. And I think that in some ways this experience is like an obstacle, right? And there are obstacles we hit, like walls that stop us, and then there are obstacles that, like the garden I planted last spring, like when the tomato plant hits the trellis, it grows up, right? And so in some ways the obstacle can also be the way, right? The obstacle can be like an opportunity. And I really struggled, and I still struggle, to hold those ideas in tension, that this can be catastrophic and difficult and awful, and also have potential for new beauty and growth and hope. And I tend to really want to be one or the other, But I think one takeaway for me is that I really want to interrogate every situation now and ask myself, like, what are the opportunities afforded by this obstacle, and what are the hardships I need to really acknowledge and live with. So yeah, I think for me it's been really a deconstruction of my thinking about music too. I mean, learning that a performance can happen in a meaningful way. You can have an intimate connection with your audience digitally. I don't think it replaces physical audiences, and I'm like buying concert tickets left and right now. I just want to go to shows so bad. But for me, it's been really a deconstruction of that binary thinking and acknowledgement that we can sort of hold these things in tension. I mean, that's how bridges stay up, right? They have tension that allows us to cross them.
So, it's been like a huge silver lining, because I've been able to experiment this year, like we could just do something really crazy out there, and if we didn't have anybody show up or people didn't want it, and so after every concert we did a survey, like a very honest survey. Please tell us, did you like this? Did you not like this? Should we do this? Or can we do a concert on a Friday? Or do you guys like Sundays? Like everything. And so everything's been a big experiment. And we just, like scientific, luckily I also, at the very beginning of this, I asked one of my older adult students who is a science guy. He's like a retired computer guy, and very that kind of a mindset, which is I'm completely opposite. I'm very what's the word, impulsive, and I just do stuff. I just make crazy decisions and have like 1,000 ideas. And he's the guy who's like, no, don't do this, do this. So he's been really great at kind of helping us steer. And so we approached everything very scientifically. That was his idea. So I have a hypothesis, and then we test it out, and if it doesn't work, we throw it out, and we keep the things that do work. So I guess that's like a long answer to your question. So yeah, we're gonna keep going with the things that worked this year. And it's a huge if, like who knows, maybe after the pandemic nobody's gonna want to do these concerts anymore. Maybe the only reason they're coming is because we're like the only thing, or maybe they love it, and maybe it's going to be even bigger, and maybe we can do even bigger and better things. So everything is like a huge if, but yeah, I definitely want to keep doing it. I'm probably going to try to find more help. And I think that's sort of happening with these partnerships, because it's like these big institutions, like we have this Colorado College in town, so these guys are starting to get interested, and there's some really smart people that are great artists that work there. So like I'm hoping to make friends, and then as a team we will conquer the world, that kind of a thing. So so anyway, yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. I don't know if
Sergei, what's the name of your project?
it's called Epic. educational partnerships immersive concerts. And if you Google it and you don't find it, it's because I naively named it Epic, where like everything else in the world is named Epic. So, but people liked it, so that's why I named it like that. But my wife liked it, so so our website is epicmustsee.org. So if you Google Epic Must See, like one word, you'll come up on it. And so we have a website and we put a bunch of stuff on there, and right now we've just been using mostly local musicians, and so that's also been great because like our orchestra, I don't know, you might have heard something. It's like the worst fight in the world. It's like an arbitration and people are threatening bankruptcies and all kinds of nasty things happening. So a lot of musicians are just, struggling. So that's also been really cool. We can actually, pay them to play a concert and like some meaningful work. And so, so that's been cool. And, but yeah, we're gonna keep going and hopefully start collaborating with people from outside Colorado. That's always been my goal. Is I've been wanting to kind of put local. We've got here in Colorado Springs. We've got either like all local, or completely people from the outside. And I want to start this thing and like kind of lead by example, where we actually take local and put them together with people from the outside, so everyone can learn and everyone can collaborate and just kind of grow like that. So hopefully we'll be able to do that.
It's really beautiful. Thanks for sharing
Oh,
that.
thanks.